Hello, people. On this episode of Nervous Breakdowns, I answer a question posed to me by a listener. She's indecisive and wants to know how she can become a better decision maker. I break it down into 3 very simple steps and a basic philosophy to help you along. Here we go.
You're listening to Nervous Breakdowns, a podcast where your questions about relationships, dating, personality, and mental health are answered by Zinno Tramontelli, a nationally certified counselor with a master's degree in clinical and counseling psychology. Here's the man himself, Zinno Tramontelli.
Welcome back, people, to Nervous Breakdowns with G. It's the 17th episode of my little podcast. I was going to do all like what I do here, but you heard my intro. Let me just get the business out of the way. Follow me on Twitter at BreakdownsWithG. You can email me your questions to breakdownswithg@gmail.com. I have my Tumblr page, breakdownswithg.tumblr.com. Subscribe to it. And you can get the podcast itself on a variety of sources. You can go to Stitcher.com, which is a cool app for Android users. They have it on iPhones as well. It's actually superior in the sense that it will stream. Like, you don't have to pre-download the podcast. You can just stream it and listen to it as it downloads. But Stitcher.com, you can subscribe to me there and you will always have my freshest episode. You can get me on iTunes, of course, and I'm also on YouTube. Please, guys, go subscribe to my channels, get these things updated automatically, and then you will always be up to date on what's going on with this podcast. So how did we come about this topic that we're doing, decision making? I have a listener, somebody who I'm associated with by family. It's a cousin of mine who had a tough decision. We were just talking kind of casually, and she said, it'd be interesting if you did a podcast on decision making. Sometimes I have a hard time knowing what's the right thing to do, and I would be really interested to know what your thoughts are on it. So I did what I normally do, which I start to research it. I actually got sidetracked. I was going to do this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and then there was that Fort Hood shooting, and I got a great opportunity to interview my friend about post-traumatic stress, which were the past 2 episodes. So I have returned. So now we're going to hit the topic that I intended to hit all along. And I did what I typically do, which is I go online and I see, what is the prevailing knowledge? What's the prevailing school of thought about decision making? Because decision making isn't really necessarily something I'm an expert in. It's just, I don't know, something that we come across. And in counseling, we do have to make decisions sometimes. So I have some philosophies and some opinions about it, but I don't know if there's specific techniques. And I did some research. I checked out Google. There was a lot of corporate stuff, a lot of rubrics and these graphs, or I don't know what you would call it, but like a quadrant, like a square cube where you put in things, and it was about what you would expect, right? It was, hey, over here you put the positive reasons why you would do a thing, and then here you put the negative reasons why you're doing a thing, and then over here is the other thing, and what's the positive pros and cons. And again, it's what you would expect. You're going to sit down and you're going to weigh out the pros and cons of the situation, and ideally make the best choice. So as I was reading through this, and it was several variations on the same theme, it all involved putting pen to paper and kind of really quantifying the different choices and the different possible outcomes. It occurred to me that that's not really the problem that people are having when they're having trouble making decisions. Generally, people, I think, run into another snag. It's one of 2 issues, which I will talk about in my steps. So let's talk about the 3 steps that I came up with for decision making. Now, the first one is going to be something that's a little different for you guys. Step 1, get to know yourself. Put on a little soft music, turn the lights down, get to know yourself. All right, now get your minds out of the gutter, first of all. I don't mean in that way, okay? When I say get to know yourself, what I mean is get an idea of what your goals are. Where are you going in life, okay? Well, Gino, I just really want to be happy. Shut up, all right? Happy is bullshit. Happy is a transient thing that occurs from moment to moment. You may be happy at a moment, but happy isn't a goal because it can't exist in perpetuity. You can't always be happy. It's impossible. It's physiological, psychologically impossible. And frankly, I just don't think it would be very healthy. I think the vast majority of us are happy when it's time to be happy and sad when it's time to be sad. Happy's not a goal. Throw that out. When I say a goal, I mean something clear, something that can be achieved and something that that you've achieved when you do it. So if your goal is to get a college degree, you're going to know when you get that college degree because you'll have it. You'll physically have the paper. You'll walk across the stage. It'll be done. It's a goal that you can accomplish. If your goal is to have a happy, there I go. See, I'm guilty of it too. If your goal is to have a healthy family, then that's something that can be quantified. Healthy, are they eating well? Are they psychologically healthy? Or are they free of trauma and stress as much as possible? The reason it's important to do this is because having a clear idea of what your goals are will inform your decision making, right? How can you know the best choice to make in a given situation if you don't know what the end game is? If you don't know where you're leading with these choices, you can't know what's the best thing to do. Now, you can have short-term goals, long-term goals. I like to have a 1-week goal, a 6-month goal, and a 5-year goal, right? So we have lots of different steps, lots of different options that we can work towards. This way, we can know when we're faced with a tough decision, does my choice in this matter move me toward my goal, away from it, or is it neutral? Right? Now, think about that. If you have a goal that you're working towards, and there's a clear choice in a situation that moves you away from that goal, then there's not much more to do about it, right? I mean, you know that you can't do that thing. If your goal is going to be injured by the short-term choice, don't make it. See, another thing you'll find is that thing that I just talked about, that happiness that everybody strives for, that delusion that we as Americans have that we must always be happy or else life is a failure. We get much closer to that when we are achieving goals. I did a whole podcast on self-esteem, right? How do we develop self-esteem? We develop good self-esteem by setting achievable goals and knocking them out, setting up the pins and knocking them down. So my goal is to graduate high school. Boom, knock it out. My goal is to graduate college. Boom, knock it out. My goal is to do this. Boom. And the goals have to be something that are reasonable, something that can reasonably be achieved. Because what happens when we do that is we start to really feel good about ourselves, right? When we start to feel that we have power, we have capability, we have and we can accomplish things in our lives that are difficult. Once that happens, we start to get towards that idea of happy. I think that when we say happy, what we really mean is I just want to feel good about myself. And that's completely achievable, right? I mean, we can have a healthy sense of self-worth with a good understanding of our strengths and our weaknesses and feel pretty good about ourselves, right? And not necessarily have to be whistling Dixie 24/7. I just think that when we say happy, we have to be clear and in our mind, maybe it's just what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Maybe it's just a word we're using. Maybe it's just crap. I'm getting stuck on it. But the idea being that we're using the word happy, but what we really mean is I want to feel good about myself. That's fine. But if you're in your mind thinking happiness is a goal, it's just impossible. You're setting yourself up for failure. So semantics, that's the word I was looking for. It's a semantic issue where we're saying happy, but we mean another thing. Fine. Sure. Okay. Now, so you identify some goals. Keeping those goals in mind, we have to ask ourselves, are these choices moving us toward or away from the goals? Right? Already we've done the bulk of the work, right? Step one has kind of knocked out most of the problems. We are able to look at situations and in the context of our long-term and short-term goals, have a good idea of whether a choice is good or bad. Right? My cousin who asked me this question, what she was grappling with at the moment was she's in graduate school, she's getting a doctorate, And she needs money too. So she wanted to get a job. And she was just really concerned that this job she was looking at would be too many hours and interfere with her schoolwork. So her goal is getting the degree, right? I mean, anything else she's doing at this point is in support of that goal. And through our discussion is essentially, we looked at it a lot of different ways, but essentially we figured out that, or at least my advice to her was, get the job, right? I think that there's a lot to be said for doing something that's difficult. If you find that the job is interfering with your schoolwork, you stop it, right? Because you that's your priority, is your schoolwork. But at the end of the day, I think that there's value in learning how to time manage. There's value in doing something difficult and stressing yourself out a little bit, because I feel like it's a muscle that needs to be worked out. Our stress management is something that we can improve by working on it. That's another thing. A lot of times as we go through the next step, which is the actual problem solving, the grids and the pros and cons and all that crap, many times I've found that not doing something because it's hard is a really shitty reason not to do it. Because it's those particular things, those specific things that we do that are difficult and we accomplish, that are really the source of our esteem, the source of our feeling good. So when we talk about the problem solving piece, a lot of times doing something that's hard is sometimes the better choice. In fact, I found an article from CBSnews.com where it was a guy who was talking about decision making, and that was his whole point. The whole article was, when faced with a choice between an easy thing and a hard thing, always pick the hard thing, because the hard thing will, and he lists all these benefits of doing the hard thing, ethical considerations. This was particularly with respect to corporate policy and corporate decision making, but the hard thing will almost inevitably be the better choice. And I don't know that I 100% agreed with this guy's article, but he made a lot of really good points. You know, like if you're faced with a situation where one thing will be more work and one thing will be more difficult in terms of the politics of an office place, chances are that might be the best way to go. Okay, so recapping, step 1, find out what the hell you're doing. Get to know yourself. Find out what your goal is. Find out what direction you're trying to move in, and that overarching direction will inform your decision making. Okay, step 2, do the grid. Find yourself. Go online, and I'm not going to give you a specific one, but go online and figure out a tool that you can use where you can put into boxes and weigh the pros and cons of each choice. Okay, let's talk about this for a second, because I feel like this is an important aspect too. When we're looking at the pros and cons of a decision or a particular option, it's very rare that we're breaking completely new ground, right? When we're looking at, should I go to school or should I get a job? Millions of people have faced that decision before. When we're looking at, should I date this person or date that person? Millions of people have dealt with that issue before. And there's value in that, because I think that we can draw on the experiences and knowledge of others to help ourselves. It's very rare that we're faced with a decision where we don't have a pretty solid idea of what the outcomes might be. Does lightning strike once in a while? Absolutely. Once in a while, you'll do what seems to be a safe bet, and it'll blow up in your face, and you almost can't even be upset about it, because it's random chance. Okay, but when we are engaging in this process of decision making, I think it's important to draw insight from people around you, from trusted people that might have encountered the same situation before. Now, be smart about the people you talk to, okay? Look at a person and look at their overall level of success in life. Do you want to get relationship advice from your buddy who has a different girlfriend every week and, lives in his mom's basement and smokes weed all the time? Maybe. I mean, if he's doing better than you are, then maybe you might want his advice. But you want to get advice from somebody who's kind of doing what you want to do, right? There's somebody that seems to have accomplished the goal or the end game that you're heading towards, and get that advice and weigh it heavily. Okay. Another benefit to asking other people advice is it's important to get an opposing viewpoint. Sometimes we get ourselves into an echo chamber, particularly when we are mulling something over internally, where we're saying things to ourselves. It's bouncing off the inside of our skull and coming back at us, and it seems to be reinforcing. So I'm not gonna do this choice because I don't really think it can be successful. Yeah, you're right. It's probably not gonna be successful. Yeah, so this choice is very unlikely. Yeah, it seems like a waste of time. That's your internal dialogue bouncing back and forth. There may be somebody in your life who can give you an opposing viewpoint and say, well, hey, did you consider this particular aspect of that problem? No, I hadn't. But doesn't that particular aspect maybe change the equation a little bit? Maybe if you take this into consideration, you may still do the same thing, but maybe you can do the same thing knowing full well the entire situation. Again, they're giving you information that you may not have considered. And how can you get new information unless you're drawing in from outside? There are lots of different processing styles, and I know many people who process things by mulling it over, who may not necessarily use another person, but may look on the internet, and that's fine. When I say ask advice, you can do your own research also. But when you're doing your own research, you have to be a good scientist. Okay, now we're going to talk about the whole scientist aspect in a few seconds, because I think that that's the other critical part. The first critical part being having a goal, but the second critical part is having a good attitude about the experiments that you're doing in your life. But a good scientist would look at his sources, would consider them carefully. You can go on the internet and find anything you want, right? You can go find somebody who will tell you that going to the casino and gambling with a particular system is a great way to make money. And maybe it is, I don't know, but I know that casinos don't get that way by giving away money, right? Like most people that go in casinos are losing money. So the odds are, if there was a special way to beat the house, you're certainly not going to find it from an internet search, okay? That's all I'm saying. So the idea being, consider the source very carefully. Also, in your problem solving, when you're doing this grid or this formula of trying to figure out the pros and cons of situations, take into account the non-quantifiable things. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to be, an adding machine and this one is a positive column, this one's a negative. As human beings, we're emotional. We're supposed to have feelings and preferences, and we're supposed to take into account the way things make us feel. So if you are looking at two cars, for example, and one's very economical and cheap and it's boring, and you have another car here that maybe doesn't have so many pluses in the plus column, but you really have a lot of fun when you drive it, you gotta add that. You gotta add that into your equations, the human factor, the way things make you feel, because you're gonna feel like crap behind that boring car. If you're a person that likes driving. If my wife, for example, doesn't particularly care what she drives as long as it does what she needs it to do. So she doesn't care. That's not a factor for her. For me, I'm a car guy. I like to drive cars that are exciting to me. So her car is much more economical and practical than mine is. Let's put it that way. So the only thing that matters when you're doing this rubric, or I keep saying rubric, I don't even really know what the word means fully, but when you're doing this grid of pros and cons and this choice or that choice, you have to always consider the degree to which it moves you to or from your goal. Okay. The last step is the simplest one, the hardest one, but the simplest one, which is to act. All right. You've done the work. You've identified a goal. You figured out the best choice being the one that moves you most towards your goal, right? Now you just have to do it. So this is the part where a lot of people struggle, because there's a lot of things that go in. There's fear of failure. I don't want to lose on this situation. I don't want to end up worse than I was before. And I think if you're having fear of failure, you really need to consider what you're risking if you fail. My experience has been, particularly when I treat people with anxiety, because they worry about everything, the cost of failing is usually zero or very little. right? I want to go apply for this job, but what if I don't get it? Okay, what if you don't get it? If you don't get it, you're going to be right where you were now. So you're jobless now. You go apply for a job. I feel bad about myself. Well, you feel bad about yourself now. Okay, so you're going to confirm your bias, right? Now, if you act and go apply for the job and get it, you may feel really good about yourself, right? You have a lot to gain and very little to lose. In most scenarios, you're faced with this type of situation. Now, I'm not saying that's always true. Certainly, we're faced with choices where sometimes we take a risk, right? And you go back to the thing I said before, which was because people have been in this situation more than likely several hundred times, 1,000 times through human history, you can have a pretty good idea of the way it's going to turn out. Okay? You can look at people's experiences, their successes and failures, and take that into account when you're making your decisions. But the last thing that the third step, the most important part of this change process, of this decision-making process, is that you must act. There have been so many times, particularly in the counseling world, where we have clients that come into us, we talk about what their goals are, therapeutic goals. I want to feel less anxious. I want to have fewer panic attacks. We talk at length about the best way to go. So what are the choices we can make? Well, research really shows that when you have panic attacks, sometimes you can, in most cases, you can feel better by exposing yourself to the things that make you anxious and using some different techniques. And the client's on board. Yeah, that really seems like the best choice. It seems like it will move me closer to my goal of having fewer panic attacks. This third step, the acting piece, is usually what hangs us up. And I don't think that change can happen. I don't think that decisions can be made. Decisions are meaningless, essentially, unless you act on them. If you have bad relationships one after the other, and you decide that the way you're going to act on this the choice you're going to make is to seek a different type of partner, but then you go back to the same type of partner, you've wasted your time. So the acting piece, the therapy comes in the acting. There's therapy in doing, and there is this is one of the essential parts of decision making. Okay, so recap the 3 steps. 1, get to know yourself. Identify your goals. What are you moving towards, right? What is the thing that you want your actions to lead to? Good. Step 2, do the problem solving, right? Figure out the nuts and bolts of the different choices you're faced with when you're making a decision, and figure out which one moves you more or less towards your goal, because that will inform your decision making. And 3, act it out. Once you've decided the best thing to do, act it out. Follow through. Okay? At the core of all of this, and this is, I think, the most important part, and what I encourage everybody I talk to that they ask me about decision making, and my clients, my friends, my family, the most important thing that you have to do is think of yourself as a scientist. Okay? Look, nobody knows the outcomes of everything that we're faced with. If you're looking for your choice is to be 100% positive that it's gonna turn out one way or another, it's rarely gonna find that. But the most important thing that you can do is to think of yourself as a scientist. Put on your lab coat and do experiments in your life. Even failed experiments in science are important because they give us data, right? When we see scientists that say, we did for example, the Large Hadron Collider is this thing in Switzerland where it's a huge multi-mile particle accelerator that shoots these microscopic things that faster than the speed of light, and they smash into each other, and they're trying to find these particular kinds of particles, but they do experiments constantly that don't work out the way they hope or the way they anticipate. In fact, a good scientist shouldn't go into an experiment with a desired outcome, right? They have some thoughts about the way things may turn out based on past evidence, but they're not really biased, ideally. I don't really think that's true. I think most scientists look for a positive outcome. But what you're doing is you're gathering data. So when they shoot two particular kinds of particles together and they don't hit right or they don't make the right kind of particles, that data is important. The scientist who gets data that doesn't turn out the way they anticipated hasn't failed. This is critical too, right? There's no ideas of self-worth wrapped up in this. Okay? Now, where self-worth comes in, where a scientist is a bad scientist, is if they disregard their data. So if they try the same experiment several times, which is okay, you can do that several times. Sometimes you want to just be sure of the results you're getting. If you try the same experiment several times and ignore the outcomes, this is where it's important when we're making our decisions not to be bad scientists. If we try the same thing in our lives, if we make the same choices over and over and over, and we don't get our desired outcome, you need to take that data into account when you make choices in the future. Okay? If you try to date the same type of person again and again and again, and if your end goal is to have a family and you're dating these kind of shady characters and they don't work out, or they treat you bad, or they're not interested in having a family, perhaps you should take that data into account. And the next time when you're faced with that choice, make your choice based on your data, right? Not date a guy who is a shady character, but date a guy or a girl who seems like they're interested, or they're verbalizing interest in settling down. Or if you're dating somebody and throughout the relationship they're telling you, I'm not interested in settling down, and that's your goal, maybe that's not the person for you to date, okay? The idea is you have to make decisions based on the data that you have available to you. If you conduct an experiment and it doesn't turn out the way you want, this is not a reflection of your self-worth, right? You're not a failure. You just have data that you can apply forward. You know, I keep referring to dating, and I refer to it because I really believe that dating is the perfect example of this, right? You're essentially, the majority of relationships that you have are going to fail, right? You're not going to, unless you meet the first person, unless the first person you meet you marry and live happily ever after with, which happens, it sure does. You're going to have several experiences dating people. And each dating relationship that you have is an opportunity for you to refine your preferences. If you date your first girlfriend, which, let's be frank, guys, you know, for most men, the first person you date is the first person that lets you date them or lets you fool around with them, right? If your first girlfriend is a type of person that is highly attention-seeking and wants to be out all the time, and that's not for you, right? You can refine that the next time around, right? You can try to date a different type of person. Essentially, you look at your ex-girlfriend and you look at their list of qualities and you say, look, these are the things I really liked about this girl. I liked that she was pretty. I liked that she made me laugh. I liked that X, Y, and Z, right? These are the things I really hated. I hated that when we argued, she used curse words. Or I hated that she was a terrible cook, right? Whatever the case is, whatever the decisions are that you come to after you've dated somebody, it's important for you to look for these qualities in the next person you date. So, in other words, the next girl you date, she curses at you when she's mad at you and she's a bad cook. Those should be red flags for you. You should say, hey, I didn't like this in my last relationship, and I'm probably not going to like it this time around. And make decisions based on that. Act. Find a new girlfriend. You know, date somebody else. Now, guys, I'm not trying to say that you should come up with your parameters at age 15 and stick with those. You know, you can always refine. I mean, sometimes you'll meet somebody that's really special, and you can overlook some things that you might normally bother you, and that's okay. But do it consciously. Don't just float through life and float through your relationships and float through your decisions, living out patterns, doing the same things over and over again, and expecting different results. I hate using that phrase because it's so corny, but it's so true. You're doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. You're failing as a scientist. Okay, your scientific experiments, your data is all pointing in one direction. You have to follow that direction. All right. So, how to make decisions? Easy. Get to know yourself. Identify your goals. So that's step one. What are your decisions leading you towards? Okay. Step two, do the math. Right. Sit down. Figure out choice A versus choice B. Which one moves you more towards your goal than the other, and do that thing. Right. Again, step 3, do that thing. That's the critical part of the decision-making process is do the thing that you know is best. And the underlying philosophy behind it all is take it easy on yourselves, guys. You don't kick yourselves in the ass if things don't work out the way you want. Just try not to do it again, right? Guilt is a wasted emotion. You can't change the past. You're going to look at your data. You're going to make decisions based on your new data, and hopefully things will turn out the way you want them next time. If they don't, you'll have more data still. But the idea is the more data comes from trying something new. So thank you very much, guys. I hope this was an informative podcast for you. Once again, I need some. I have to say this month has been my best month so far for downloads. I am listed on this podcastland.com. It's a website that ranks podcasts. And if you get an opportunity, go there, podcastland.com, and vote for this show. It takes your email. I'm not sure what they do with the email, frankly. So if you're weird about giving your email out, then don't give it. I did use my own email, and they haven't spammed me. They haven't sent me anything other than just a confirmation for the vote. So it seems pretty low impact on my email account, but go vote for me. If I win, I will be featured on their site for the whole next month, for the month of May. So that would be kind of cool. It's driven a lot of downloads my way, and I appreciate that. If you guys need mental health help, there's 2 websites that I always direct people to. The first one is nationwide, SAMHSA.gov. SAMHSA.gov. It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association website. You can go on there. You can find a provider in your area. You can get help with addictions. There's tons of information. It's a great site to start your search for mental health treatment. Also, if you have insurance, you can call your insurance card and they'll give you a list of people that won't charge you too much for it, for treatment. If you live in central New Jersey, come and visit the practice where I work. It's called Be Well Counseling, Be Well NJ, BEWELLNJ.com. My picture's on there under the providers. You can read all about me and see what I look like if you're curious. But the practice is very good. They have excellent counselors, treat all kinds of stuff, and they take basically every type of insurance. So come out. If you need some treatment, come out. We'll be happy to help you out. Follow me on Twitter at breakdownswithg. Email me breakdownswithg@gmail.com. breakdownswithg.tumblr.com is my site. Please subscribe to me wherever you can. If you can subscribe on YouTube, if you can subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher. I just really like seeing my download numbers go up. So thank you guys so much for the support. And email me your questions. Join the conversation. I want to hear from you. Take care.